for introduction. The House then comes to questions for oral answer. And the first question stands in the name of the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question's to the Minister of Finance. What advice, if any, has he received on the likely impact of an increase in GST on New Zealand families?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the advice I have received is that that would depend on the details of the switch between GST and income tax, and also on the impact of changes in taxation of property, which tends to be owned by higher income New Zealanders.
The Honourable Annette King.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. When he said yesterday most people will not be worse off under his proposed tax changes, and the Prime Minister said the vast bulk of people won't be worse off, who will be worse off?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, as I just told the member, the impact on families will depend on the details of the income and GST tax switch, and also on the impact of the taxation of property. And I'll have to say the data about the ownership of property is a bit less certain, but it does show that property is mainly owned by higher income New Zealanders, as you would expect.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Annette King.
Mr Speaker, that was a very direct question based on the Minister's own quote yesterday, where he said that few would be worse off. Having said that, he must have some idea as to who is worse off, and he did not answer that question.
Well, in fairness, I do have to say, the Honourable Member, the Minister in replying pointed out that that would depend totally on the detail of the final proposals or the final measures. And he clearly doesn't have that detail at the moment, and I don't believe it's possible for me to ask him to answer any more precisely. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor.
I want to be a little bit careful here, because I am, I think, disputing your ruling, but it was very clear in the House yesterday when the Minister of Finance said that few people would be affected. It's for that to happen, he had to have at least a range, a decision which involved a range of people. So I think for him to continue to mislead the House as to the pretending he doesn't know.
Now the member is saying, I don't mind him questioning, raising his point of order, but he's now getting into dangerous territory. The English language is a fairly simple language, and when someone says the vast majority of people won't be worse off, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the detail of who may or may not be worse off. It means the intention in setting the final policy is that the vast majority won't be worse off. That's why I understand what he said. Now, I can't. That's why I'm not pursuing. Asking the Minister to answer further, because it seems perfectly clear to me what he said.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Following on from the exchange which has just occurred, and fully accepting that the Minister may have in his possession a range of scenarios and that no final decision has yet been made to choose between them, and thereby accepting your point, sir, it would seem to suffice if in his answer to my colleague he were able to give just one example of an individual or group that
order. I think that order.
The
member will sit down. The member will resume his seat. I think I've listened to enough on this matter. The Honourable Annette King, supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. As New Zealand Super is only adjusted annually, what action will he take to ensure a pensioner whose meat went up by 3%, whose milk went up by 5%, whose PAR is going up by 5%, and now faces a 15% GST on top of all that, will not be worse off under his proposed tax cuts?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I would simply repeat the answer I used before, but I would point out to the member that in a GST income tax switch, superannuitants are a group who would find they benefit from income tax cuts because, as she knows, superannuation is tied to the after-tax average wage. And the member might reflect on the fact that during her term in office, most annual CPI increases were greater than 2.5% during her term in office, and she didn't seem worried about it then.
David Bennett.
Supplementary question to the Minister of Finance.
Order. I've called order. I say to the Honourable David Cunliffe, I've called David Bennett, and I want to be able to hear him. David Bennett.
Supplementary question to the Minister of Finance. How will the government make the tax system fairer?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we'll certainly do a better job than the previous government. Under the previous government, an IRD survey showed that of the 100 wealthiest taxpayers in New Zealand, half of them were not paying the top tax rate. IRD information also shows that under the Labor government, in 9 years, the number of people paying tax on $1 million actually dropped. It actually dropped.
Order.
So the Labor government who say they're all about fairness, let the rich...
Order. The Minister is sailing close to the wind when he ignores the Speaker on his feet. Honourable Pete Hodgson had called a point of order. Although I'm not surprised members couldn't hear that he'd called a point of order because the noise was just unacceptable. The Honourable Pete Hodgson.
Mr. Speaker, the question was, how does he intend to make the tax system better? And now, 1 minute into the answer, it seems to me that the question ought to be addressed.
Order. The Minister was pointing out what he saw as a problem with the tax system that he, I presume, intends to try and fix up. It seemed to be a reasonable answer to the question asked. Is there a further supplementary question? The Honourable
The House out of a trust.
No chance.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Has he seen Treasury's assumptions on GST, which showed if GST was reduced, only a fraction of the reduction would be passed on to consumers? And if so, has Treasury given him assumptions showing that if GST is increased, that retailers are likely to add a margin for themselves? If so, how will he compensate New Zealanders for these increases in prices?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, I thought that Minister would know how it works because she's been part of 2 cabinets that increased GST. The first one to bring it in and the next one to increase it to 12.5% with no compensation at all.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I suspect I understand what the Honourable Annette King asked a reasonable question. I think the Minister should have made some attempt to answer it rather than just say she's been involved in increasing GST in the past and then therefore should know about it. I think the House deserves a little more focus on the question than that.
Mr. Speaker, I expect that the advice Treasury has given me, and there'll be more to come, will be the same as was given to that Minister when her government increased GST from 10% to 12.5% with no compensation whatsoever. And that advice is to the effect that a significant part of the increase is not passed on, that retailers have to absorb it because of the competition in the market.
The Honourable Maryan Street.
To the Minister, what compensation for any GST increase does the Minister have planned for the 348,000 plus tertiary students who, if they are employed at all, are typically in low-paid and part-time positions, so therefore will not benefit from tax cuts for the rich, are neither superannuitants nor beneficiaries who may receive some compensation, and so will simply have to bear the increase in GST?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, those matters are all under consideration.
The Honourable Annette King.
Has he seen a report that the Maori Party are looking at ditching their support for the government over the proposed increase in GST? If so, was he, as Finance Minister, aware of their intentions, and what does such a threat do to his tax proposals?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I am aware that the Maori Party have points of view that they want to advance, and we are in intensive discussions with them so that we can all understand, because we all have an interest in understanding the impact of any rise in GST, as we all have an interest in understanding the impact of lowering income tax rates, so this country, which spends more than it earns, can get round to earning more, investing more, saving more and increasing incomes.
Question number 2.